Hello, welcome once again to the Call to Lead podcast. I'm your host, Colby Rich. With me today, really excited about this, is my friend Gerald Pilkilton. When I think of Gerald, I think of Schlotsky's Deli. So some of you may not even know what that is, but Schlotsky's Deli, really good sandwiches, and their motto was silly name, serious sandwich. And with Gerald, it's silly name, serious mustache, because when he talks, you can't see his mouth move. It's amazing. And if you're watching on YouTube, you see that. If you're on one of the other platforms where there's not video, you just have to imagine. He'd be a great ventriloquist. Gerald is a captain at Denison Fire Rescue. He may captain about the same, but we've kind of promoted. Our careers have been similar. Denison is right next to Sherman, so we've known each other from work, but we're also involved in a peer support team. We're both kind of in leadership roles in that, a regional peer support team for mental health for first responders. And when we first started doing that several years ago is how we got to know each other. And we realized really quickly that we both are plugged in to churches in different ways and are guitar and music gear nerds. And there's not many people that you can talk about that stuff with. And so we've kind of bonded over those things. So Gerald, how are you today, my friend?
Man, I'm doing good. I'm glad to be here.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about you and your family?
Yeah, like you said, I'm in Denison, live in Denison. I grew up in Oklahoma, but it was always easier to go to Denison for anything. So that's where my wife's from. So we migrated towards Denison. So we've been in Denison, or at least me, since about 2014. Uh, but like I said, I have a wife. We got two kids, a couple of grandkids now, and we're just loving life. My wife, she teaches here in Denison, work in Denison, so our life kind of revolves around the workings of Denison. So,
What do the grandkids call you guys?
before we had grandkids, I think my wife, she always was going to be a Mimi, which luckily she got that. But before we had the kids, I was supposed to be Grumpy,
I could see
but
that. Yeah.
but so the our first grandkid, he actually came to us through the foster, like, system, and I guess they teach those kids, to be pretty respectful and stuff like that. And everyone in my family calls me G as my nickname. And so as they were introducing him to all of us, he kept hearing, G. And so they're always taught to either Mr. or Mrs. And so he calls me Mr. G. And so I didn't get an option. There's no Grumpy or anything. It's Mr. G. So I'm Mr. G to the grandkids now,
But
which I'm
Mr.
glad to
G
have
can
that. It's pretty
stand,
cool.
it can stand for Mr. Grumpy though. It can still
That's
stand for
true.
that.
That's
Yeah.
that's true. So
You can still stand for that. Tell us a little bit about how you came to faith in Christ, how you became a Christian.
like I said, so I grew up in Oklahoma in a little bitty town called Kemp, and there's a couple of churches there. One's a Baptist church, one's a Church of Christ, and for whatever reason, my family went to the Baptist church when I was, I don't know, 2, maybe 3. So I grew up in church there. Did all the VBS stuff, the camps and everything. And I want to say I was 7 whenever I felt God pushing on me, man. Like, I know I was smart enough to know, like, hey, I need Jesus in my life. He's the only way to get to heaven. So thankfully, through the leadership there, and it's a kind of full circle thing. That my father-in-law was the pastor there at the time, and so my mom actually took me to his house. I guess I was maybe running around the house talking about, I need to be saved, talking about Jesus, talking about all this stuff, and she didn't really know what to do, and so she put me in the car and drove me to his house, and so I accepted Jesus on his front porch essentially. So it's, at the time he was my pastor, but now he's my father-in-law, so it's kind of crazy.
That's cool.
Yeah. So yeah, I grew up at an early age. I don't have like the typical, I don't want to say typical, but I don't have the hardship part of life where that's what led you to Christ kind of thing.
Yeah.
Of course I've experienced hardships. I think that's one thing that people kind of misunderstand is that, you just because you have Jesus, that it doesn't mean there's not going to be any more struggle
Mhm.
or hardships in your life. But I accepted Christ at an early age, so I didn't. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I grew up in church, and I've talked about it on here before, but I, didn't get saved till I was 19. It was my parents' faith. It wasn't my faith. I did all the right things for all the wrong reasons, right? And so then
Right,
when I was
right, right.
19, God got a hold of me because my freshman year of college, I just went wild. I went off the rails, and did, anything and everything. And
Hmm.
until God got a hold of me. And people talk about like, well, my testimony isn't anything special. Well, actually, it is, but, because how much better is it to be spared from some of that stuff, from that prodigal type, you know what I mean? Because in
Sure,
a way,
100%.
we're still prodigals because any sin is still pulling us away from God, and no sin's
For
worse than
sure.
any other sin, but like that faith experience is no less valid and is looking back is better. Like I wish I didn't have, you know what I mean? I didn't have that time in my life where I was rebelling. You know what I mean?
Right.
So transition a little bit. So you've been a firefighter for a while. So what did you do before you were a firefighter? And then what led you to the fire service?
Man, so growing up in school was always easy for me. And I don't mean to like boast or brag or anything, but generally pretty smart guy, I think. And so I never had to study or anything like that. Just like it I just like absorbed it. And so I I would say that I developed bad habits in high school that I just knew the answer and didn't have to work at it. And so when I got finished with school, I graduated pretty much top of my class, over 4.0, and I had full ride scholarships to several colleges, and I chose to go to Oklahoma State for an electrical engineering degree, and got up there and went to class. Class was easy and stuff, but friends were a lot cooler, and Halo was a lot cooler, Xbox,
Hmm.
and
Oh yeah.
so the first, I don't know, probably the first year or so, I was pretty disciplined and going to class and then doing all that stuff. But I became friends with people that weren't in my classes, and so they'd be like, "Hey man, we're gonna go do this, or we're gonna play Halo all day. Come on!" And so I ended up going to changing my major to Halo essentially, and I didn't party or anything. We played Halo and hung out, and I would show up to class on like days that I knew I had to be there for like finals and stuff like that, and I would pass those with flying colors, but I didn't have enough of the other grades to balance out my GPA. They put me on like a suspension of, one semester, and they told me, hey, you got to make it back up, whatever. And I was pretty diligent. I think I went one more semester and I got it back up, but then I did the same thing again, man. And so they kicked me out. I think I ended up having about halfway done with the degree. So I mean, I still had quite a bit of college credits and stuff like that, but yeah, they kicked me out, man. It was a learning experience, and I didn't know what I was gonna do. I came back home, and I had to do something because I couldn't be a bum on the couch anymore. So I was just trying to find work, doing whatever. I ended up picking up a job at a Big Lots distribution center up in Durant, and man, that's some hard work because they put me back in these things called mods, and you're pretty much throwing all this heavy product on these conveyor belts all day, and man, you wear your back out. I think I was there about 10 months, and things weren't really going that good. And a bunch of my friends that I had a neighbor across the street. He actually was working at Denison at the time, and he's like, "Man, don't you come go to fire school, go to this, He's like, "Come hang out with us and see what you think." And I pretty much became like I don't want to say station dog because that kind of sounds bad, but I was at the station probably more than I was at home, and
Hmm.
so I kind of became the guy that knew everybody before I worked there. And I went to fire school like that summer that I quit the Big Lots deal, and it took me like 3 years to get on at Denison, but I was working some EMS gigs in between. My first gig was at the Choctaw Casino. I worked uh, I worked nights and weekends up there, man, and so I got some experience with some people because dude, they
Oh
come out of the
yeah.
woodworks on the weekends,
Hmm.
and I worked there until they offered me a full time spot at Preston EMS, and I worked there until I got hired at Denison, and I've been at Denison since. May of 15. And I'm actually going back out to Preston to do some part-time stuff, so it's kind of full circle. Yeah,
So
I got into it for friends and because that ended up loving it. But
yeah, and now you progressed through the deal. So you were firefighter, paramedic, then engineer, driver, whatever you want to call it, and then and
yeah,
now been captain for a little while too.
yep, almost 2 years as a captain now, a
Yeah.
year and a half or so. I spent, I guess, about 6 years as a firefighter paramedic, and then did two. We had to do at least 2 years in each spot at Denison. So right at the 2 year mark, there was a promotion test, and I took it, and I ended up scoring number one on that promotion exam. So I got the spot. I only had one spot at the time, so but I love it now, man. It's a sweet gig.
You've known your wife for a long time, I guess, before she was your wife, right? So
Yeah,
how did
yeah,
that
a
happen? How did you end up talking the pastor's daughter into marrying you?
so it's gonna sound kind of weird, but so she, since she was at the church at the time, she's 13 and a half years older than me. So she's my cougar. But so she actually taught me in some of my like youth classes, which there's nothing going on there, but just that's how we initially knew each other. But after, I guess, probably, I don't know, probably during my time of like messing up at Oklahoma State, I came back home, and she was still at the church and stuff, and she was a runner at the time. I like to stay in shape and work out and stuff, and so we kind of made like a little friend group of running and everything, and we'd go to 5Ks, and yeah, she wanted to run like half marathons and stuff, which I ain't. Dude, if it's over 3 miles, I'm out. But I'd
Oh
go and
yeah,
support her.
me too.
We'd all go and do things, and so we just became good friends. We just hung out at different get-togethers and stuff, and she'd have summer parties and stuff like that, and so we were pretty good friends. And she went through divorce and stuff, and I was still her friend, and we just became more than friends, and it's just how it worked out, man. Thankfully.
Yeah. So you guys have had to walk through some difficult times together since y'all been together. So kind of share about that. Share about the accidents of different things that have happened that you guys have had to deal with together, and maybe how that's challenged your faith and built your faith.
Yeah, so like I said, we were running friends. We'd go to the gym, we'd work out and everything, and we had gotten married in June of 16. I think she was training for maybe a marathon or half marathon or something. So what we would do is there's a local gym here in Denison. We'd park our cars at Denison, or at the Nautilus in Denison. She'd get off work, I'd get off work, we'd both meet there. And then we'd pick a spot, somewhere in town that we'd run a few miles on, and then we'd come back to the gym and do some weightlifting or whatever. Because that's where I was interested in lifting weights. She didn't really want to lift weights, but as a compromise, we'd do each one or whatever. So at this point, I think we're probably on like a maybe a 3 to 5 mile run or whatever. We had just finished it. This was on September 12th. I was a little bit faster than her at the time. She's kind of hot headed sometimes, and so I would always watch her, and as I'm running, I just look back and make sure she's there or whatever, just checking on her and stuff. I've known her to get mouthy with some people that, maybe got in her way or whatever. So this at the end of our run, I was looking back and I was like, man, I don't, where is she, man? And I was like, she's probably back there telling somebody off, for getting in her way or whatever. And I started seeing these cars like piling up, man, and brake lights and stuff. I was like, man, something ain't right. I took off sprinting back there, man. And when I get back there, she's laid out on the ground. She's like got blood everywhere, um, just all beat up, and she's freaking out. She doesn't know what's going on. Come to find out, this guy had, I don't know, he wasn't paying attention or something, and he hit her somehow and just crushed her face and broke her leg, and just she's bruised from pretty much head to toe, all on her right side. Man, she's like pouring blood out of her mouth, and I didn't know if she was bleeding internal or what, man. And thankfully, because we all had the training, me and you and
Hmm.
guys like us, and so I just kind of I shut I kind of had to shut off like personal stuff and go to work, and so I just start trying to open her mouth up and stuff, and thankfully I could see that she wasn't bleeding like deep. It was she had like cut her tongue like almost in half. So I just kind of turned her head and told her to keep spitting and stuff. And thankfully there were some people that were around, and I had my phone and I called 911 and I was like, "Hey man, like this is me." And they're like, "What?" And they they dispatched the whole dang department. So I had
They
like
take
pretty
care of
much
their
a
own,
struct.
right? You take care of
Yeah,
your own
man,
people.
I had a pretty much a structure fire response to her injuries and stuff, and those guys they came and they did their thing, and they ended up flying her because she had so much trauma and stuff. We flew her down to Plano, and man, she went through I think about 13 surgeries or something to
Mm.
rebuild everything, and she still has pain from it. Her back is just messed up, and so she suffers every day still from it. Thankfully she's still here. We'd been married just not even 3 months when that happened,
Mm.
and so we definitely got a good dose of for better or worse, because I mean, like I said, we're still dealing with it, but that that first little bit after that was pretty tough, man, especially on her.
And you guys, you've always been part of, I mean, part of that church. And like I said, your father-in-law was the pastor there. And at that point, were y'all both pretty plugged in and
Oh
serving
yeah,
and
yeah. I mean, we were. I've I grew up there, pretty much doing all the tech stuff, media and audio, video kind of stuff. She was pretty involved with a bunch of different groups. They made a running group, and she would teach different classes and stuff. We weren't quite doing the music thing yet, I don't think. She and I would play, like the specials and stuff like that, but we weren't doing the full band thing. We'd play music and everything. But yeah, we're definitely always involved in whatever.
how important was it, like, in the kind of in that recovery process and all that, to have, a group of people that you knew were praying for you guys and just, and just were there? Like, how important was that in that process?
I don't think that we would have made it through without having people praying for us, man. I think the power of prayer is the most powerful thing that we can really have as far as people on this earth for us. I mean, we had people showing up left and right, dropping off food, telling us, hey, we're praying for you here, we're praying for you there, and it was like people that I didn't even know, like, had heard about it, and just reaching out to us and always giving us, the support that we needed. So yeah, I mean, I have no doubt that we would have made it through, but man, it would have probably been a much tougher road without it for sure.
So, transition a little bit. So, you guys
Mhm.
went through some hard things, and then you said you weren't really kind of doing the music thing yet, but then at some point, y'all kind of transitioned and started doing music at that church, and you were playing guitar. And for those that don't know, and we're trying to get something worked out before we started to have like Gerald do a guitar intro, but couldn't get the technology to work. But we will do it another
Yeah.
day. Gerald is a fantastic guitar player, and I'm not just saying that because I'm his friend. He is legit, very, very good, very talented, very blessed to be able to do that. And so but it's not just you playing. So your wife sings. Tell us about that. Like your family was pretty much. Well, I mean, we're all plugged in. So
Yeah.
what all did y'all do at the church, and have y'all done at church, and then at the high point of you guys being all plugged in? How much was your family plugged in there?
So I think I'll take it back to the beginning. Probably, I can't remember if I was 14 or 16. I want to say I was 16. The pastor at the time, my father-in-law, not my, he wasn't my father-in-law then, obviously, but he he wanted to kind of do like a youth kind of band thing, and so he kind of got us started. He was playing acoustic guitar and singing, and then he kind of built like a band of people around him. And at the time, I had no I had never touched an instrument before in my life. Like I wanted to, but I always thought it was like something that was like unattainable, like extremely expensive. I never asked my mom for anything like that. But he had a bass. And he's like, "Hey man, I need somebody to play bass." And he's like, "This is simple, you know." And he showed me, it was, I think we were playing like a song in the key of G because he loves G, man. He won't play outside of G really, but so he showed me,
Why would
G,
you?
C, and
Why would you play outside
oh
of G?
yeah,
What's the point?
right, yeah. So he showed me G, C, and D, and then hit the open E or whatever if you ever have to hit it. And to me, my mind was blown. I was like, man, I'm making music. I took it home and I was fiddling around and I got pretty bored with it. Just thumping those four notes. I think about I don't know, maybe 6 months later, I was playing acoustic guitar. I listened to enough music. It's like, man, I don't want to be the rhythm guy. I want to be the lead guy. So I just kind of started teaching myself. YouTube wasn't quite really the thing yet, but there was still tabs out there,
Hmm.
and so you could just find a song, and most of the time they weren't really right, but they get you close, man. So I just really just playing and listening kind of got me going. But it took us about, I don't know, 12 to 14 years of just playing specials and stuff like that to kind of get the full band thing going. And my wife, man, she grew up in choir, and he made her sing and when she was growing up doing specials and stuff. And so she's always been a singer. She plays piano. When we decided to try to do the full band thing, at first, we were just doing me, her. We might have somebody on bass, and then we'd, fill the rest in with, tracks or something. And we had bought a guitar for our son to try and, pick around and play with us and stuff. And he had a little bit of interest in it, but I think he might have been a little too young at the time. So he kind of didn't mess with it. And I brought the bass home one day and I was like, hey man, like, why don't you try this out? And, man, he fell in love with it. And then he started playing band at school and stuff. So it was kind of making sense to him then. And so I taught him how to play the bass. And so it was me, her, him, and we had a couple of singers at the church and stuff. And then, we tracked the rest. And then our daughters, she kind of felt left out, sort of, It's like, hey, what, you want to try and try the drums out? So we bought her a little electric kit and started filling her in. And so it became pretty much a traveling band, And
Hmm.
so we were plugged in as far as the music goes. Like it's all of us. And our daughter, her husband, he'd help us run lyrics, and I had it all run through Pro Presenter, like so he would run lyrics for us, or I'd show him how to. He might not necessarily known what knobs did what, but I could show him like, hey, I need this level turned up here whenever this is going on, as far as mixing and stuff. And so he'd help us run mixer or lyrics or whatever. And so yeah, it was a full family affair, and that's just the music. I mean, Kinley, our daughter, she was involved in kids ministry, Sunday school, Wednesday night stuff. I mean, you name it. We decorated the church constantly. We were there pretty much every time the doors were open.
Yeah, I know
Involved in.
y'all took people to camp. Y'all took teenagers
Oh
to youth
yeah,
camp, Falls Creek, all that stuff because we talked about that before.
yeah. I mean, I would take when we do vacation picks for work, I would I would pick around Vacation Bible School and Falls Creek. Two weeks of my vacation were they weren't a vacation. That I was working with the youth or the kids, and I love doing that. So I'm glad I get to do that.
I
But
feel you because this next year, my 2 weeks of vacation because we picked 2 weeks to start with and then pick you know round one and then pick some other days here and there. We'll be in Honduras the last week of June on a mission trip. We come back on a
mhm,
Saturday, wash our laundry, pack on Sunday, and leave Monday for Falls Creek for youth camp for a week. So that's my 2 weeks
yeah,
right there. So I'm with you. Same thing.
yeah. This
So
last summer, the way we did it was children's camp, which is only like a half a week thing, and then the next week was Vacation Bible School, and then we left on Saturday, the day after vacation, because we do a VBS like Monday through Friday, and uh, we left on Saturday for family vacation. We drove to Florida, did a beach thing, and then the Saturday that we got back, like you said, just same thing: wash your clothes, pack, and Monday morning we left for Falls Creek, and we were there till the next Saturday morning. So my whole month of June was tied up in church, except for that week that we were in Florida. But
So, well, it's one of the things you and I have talked about before is that because you've worked at hospital stuff too, like doing, working as a paramedic, medical stuff at
yeah,
hospital, kind of as a part time gig. And you said working at Preston kind of part time. And then, because most firemen do something else, right? I'm paid staff at my church. And then, of course, you've got kids and now grandkids. My kids are both teenagers. And the other thing we bonded over is, my wife plays bass in our church band and my son plays drums. He's 16, has been playing drums since he was 9 or 10 at the church. And then my daughter does all she takes pictures for social media. So we're very similar in those things. And
hmm
it's one of the reasons I want to talk to you about this is that between our shift work, which is stressful enough, right? Because y'all do 4896, we do 2448, but you're gone for long periods of time. You get to be home for long periods of time, but you're gone for long periods of time. And it creates
right.
its own stressors. But then kind of balancing that with church, the fact that you're not going to be at church all the time, but you're still leading at church, right? And you got to kind of figure out how to balance that. And then with your family, there's times that you can't be there for things you want to be there for. And then on top of that, we both struggle with saying no to people when they ask us for help with stuff,
Oh
whether
yeah,
it's tech stuff like, going and helping other churches with sound stuff or like guitar stuff, whatever it is. We don't say no to people very often. We're probably not very good at that. How
right.
do you guys find balance in that? Like making sure that the priorities are where they should be. How important is that?
For us, it's always God comes first. He's our priority, and I think we're pretty good at balancing that. You know, of course, life gets in the way sometimes, but I would say that for me, I'm blessed in the fact that I live in Denison, I work in Denison, my kids go to school in Denison, and my wife works in Denison. So, and I work for such a great department that if you let them know, like, hey, something's going on, like, and it's in town, they'll allow me to take my crew over to that event or whatever. We're still going to respond like we do, but you know, there's a game or something going on, I get to go to that, and I'm still on shift. I may only get to see a quarter or an inning of it or whatever, but I got to be a part of it at least for a little bit, and so I'm super blessed there. I don't go to the church wasn't in Denison, so that thing kind of shift work kind of affects that. But thankfully, there's some guys here that are willing to trade off, for a few hours.
Hmm.
So if I had something that was super important, like on a Sunday or sometimes we'd have events on Saturdays or whatever, they'd cover me for a few hours and I'd go take care of it. So I've been able to really balance it pretty well here. Like, it's not 100% that I get to always be at everything, but my wife's pretty good about scheduling. We have a pretty good family calendar and stuff, and so we kind of know in advance. And of course, she knows my shift schedule. As long as I don't change shifts, you can see it at pretty much infinity. And so we're pretty good. It took us a little bit to get used to it because she's having to pick up a lot of slack as far as moving parts around if I'm at work. But I would say my situation is probably above par for most people as far as being able to work around things. Thankfully, I know, so and maybe that's because the way that we have prioritized things, it just worked out that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I definitely believe that God honors us when we give him his rightful place,
For
and he
sure.
blesses us in so many different ways when
Yeah.
we can do that. So I want to talk about fire service again in a minute. Before we do that, before we transition back there.
Mhm.
So church is a interesting thing, right? And I may get in trouble for saying this, but I don't really care. But uh, I've always said this, and I say this about the fire service too. Like the fire service is great if it wasn't for all the people that you have to deal with in the fire service, an
Oh yeah.
EMS or whatever. And that's not talking about people that you pick up. That's talking about the people you work with a lot of times, right? The people who are
Oh
involved.
oh, yeah.
Because I think it was I think his name's Guy Greenfield, Dr. Greenfield. years ago. I'd read this at seminary, but a book called The Wounded Minister. And one of the things he does is he applies some psychological disorders to people that are inside of churches, really any organization. And the one that really stuck with me, I read this 20 years ago or something, but it was called a pathological antagonist. And so these are people who are only happy when they're causing problems. And really, every organization has those people, and
For
whether it's
sure.
in the fire service, it's in your if you're a teacher at a school like your wife, there's those people that are like, okay, I just need to back off from this person because that's going to put me in a bad mood. And in
Hmm.
churches, those people are there too. What are some challenges that you guys through the years have had in ministry? And that could be some of the scheduling challenges with what we do, but also just the challenges of dealing with people and dealing with ministry, I've always said that we always talk about you'll never find a perfect church because there's imperfect people in that church, right? Maybe the
Oh yeah.
perfect place for you to be where God wants you to be. But if you're looking for the perfect church, you will not find it. So stop looking. Just find
Right.
one and plug in and serve, right? Heard somebody say one time, if you find the perfect church, the day that you walk in the doors, it won't be perfect anymore because you're there, you know?
That's
So
true.
what are some challenges you guys have faced in some of that stuff?
So I've only been a part of camp, my whole life really, and so I'm sure churches operate differently, but for my entire life, we've pretty much done things our own way, and it's always worked. And I think the biggest thing is when people start trying to change things that I don't know for their I don't think just because they think things need to be changed. I don't, and so I think personalities. I guess is what, like you said, it's just people do things different. But and like you said, they'll probably get in trouble for saying this kind of stuff. But uh, recently my father-in-law he retired from camp, and things have started to change out there. And for us, it didn't work out, and so we've moved away from camp. But I think whenever people start like taking things personal and stuff, like instead of basing things on scripture and the fact that things were working, through the people that were being faithful there. Whenever that kind of stuff starts falling away, I think it's for us. It was time for us to go, and so I think the struggle is it's people, like you said, man. And I don't want to say that they're not being faithful into what God's led them to do, but it just wasn't where we felt God was leading us to be anymore. Because and I don't want to make it sound personal or anything, but we were putting forth a lot of effort without really receiving anything back. And it's not like what it's about, but just a lot of pushback, and it felt like everything that we did, there was always something, someone else fighting against us. And, I know that's Satan doing his job, man. But I think at this point in our life, like we needed some change. And so maybe that's what spurred all that up. And I don't know, but yeah, definitely people and personalities. I think maturity and in faith, I guess. People that get put into leadership roles that maybe aren't quite ready for that position, that can really affect things. And that not just in the church, but that's in the fire service and life in general. Like,
Yeah.
that can really that can change things for the better or for the worse. Just depending on what their life experience is and what their experience with God is.
Yeah. I remember at a church where we were looking at adding someone to be a deacon. And that church, deacons were, you know, ran things, right? They voted on
Hmm.
everything and they ran things, which is not biblical, but that's how they did it, how they'd always done it. And
Hmm.
a person started coming to church, and some of the other deacons were like, well, this guy is influential in the city and everybody knows him. So let's make him a deacon. And I remember
Yeah.
somebody saying that, like, that's why they want to make him a deacon. And I was like, wait a minute.
Mm.
Like, what are you talking about? Like, there's biblical,
Yeah.
we can look through the book of Timothy and Titus and we can see like qualifications, and you can look at Acts and see when they're first added. And nothing, it said nothing about their they're an important person in town. You know what I mean? Like nothing
Mhm.
about that. So, but that's how that church did that. And I mean, I've seen it because, I've been in ministry for almost 24 years now, but the first two, I was an intern at a church for 2 years and then part time. And then we got married and went to a full time church. I was there 2 years and all of us, the whole ministry staff got ran off, right? We all got, it was kind of a fire or quit kind of thing. Uh,
Mhm.
and the church was growing. I mean, it had doubled in size in the 2 years I was there. And then half a dozen people in leadership were like, we don't like all of these new people that are coming and we don't want them here. So y'all all need to leave. So we left.
Mm. Yeah.
Went to the next town and did a church plant. And that was a wonderful time for 2 years. But at the end of that, like some of the vision of what that ministry, what that church was going to look like me and Melissa were like, my wife and I were like, oh, I don't think we really see that anymore. And around that time, a guy who I'd known had come and said, hey, I want you to come do youth and music at our church back in Fannin County. We've been in McKinney, come back to
Mhm.
Monum. And I was like, I'm not interested. And then I was like, well, this isn't really the direction we feel led to go where we're at now. But I'd always had those deals where God had like spoken clearly, like, I feel like, yes, do this. You know what I mean? And I was praying about this, like, should we leave? And I got no clarity. And I was like,
Mm.
okay, God's never not given me an answer. It's always been yes or no, clearly. And I remember meeting with a pastor and he said, and asked his advice and he said, you know what? Maybe God's just saying, wherever you're at, you're going to serve me. I'm going to let you pick. I already know what you're going to pick because I'm God, right? But I'm going to let you
Yeah.
pick. You do what you want, and I know as long as you honor me, I'll bless you. So just I already know what you're going to pick. So just pick it. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
man, there's so much freedom in that. I'd never thought about that before because I was always like, I got to make the right decision. I got to do the right thing, or God's not going to be happy with me. And at that point, he told me that, and I was like, okay, maybe it's as I'm going, I need to honor God, not so much where I go, but as I'm going to wherever I'm going to,
Yeah.
just continue to honor Him in that. And then that eventually led us to the church we're at now. And I've been here 16 years now, and I wonder looking back if some of that time, I know y'all were there for a long time. I wonder if some of the things that I went through in those other churches, if I would have stuck it out, if maybe would have, gotten over that hump and then things would have been like it is now at this church, but I didn't, but God knew that. I mean, it was all his plan and his purpose is
Sure.
to lead us where we are. But yeah, but there's every church we had those people, that were, as I always said, like church is great except for all the people, and
Mhm.
I say that kind of jokingly, because it's not all the people, but there are a handful who, you know, who maybe don't have the same priorities that the leadership has, or the leadership doesn't have the same priorities that they should have, according to scripture or whatever it is.
Mhm.
There's that conflict all the time. But man, when the church is living, when you can all be on the same page and living according to how God wants you to be, and loving others and loving your community, man, it's a great place. I mean, it's the way Jesus chose to spread the message of hope to the world is through the local
Yep.
church. And so, as much as we get frustrated with it sometimes, we have to remember that this is ordained by God and this is the way He chose to do it. And so, and part of dealing with messy people is getting messy, and that's part of ministry. And and I think in the fire service is similar too. So, because when you mentioned that a second ago, what are some challenges you faced in that, and maybe all the way through, but maybe when you have people over you, which we still do, even as if you're a station officer, you're not, you have
Mhm.
officers in front of you, but uh, maybe as you've promoted, just conflicts or different issues that you've seen and how you address that. And even now as a station officer. So, for people that don't know, station officer is in charge of a crew on a shift at a station. So, the apparatus is there, the station, a third of the time. Whenever you're there, you're in charge of that. On all the calls, you're in charge of your guys. You're in charge of what they do, what they don't do. On a fire scene, you're the one who has to sometimes be the eyes and ears and make sure that they don't do something they shouldn't do and they do the things they should do. So, what are some challenges you've kind of come across in that as well?
I would say, at least from the station officer side of things, like, it took me a minute to find that line of, like, buddy and boss kinda situation,
Mhm.
you know? 'Cause, I mean, all the guys that I work with, man, they're my friends, and, we've been for the most part, all of us have been together for a while, and it took me a second to kinda figure that out, but last year, we do some evaluations every year for the guys that have been there over a year. We evaluate our rookies monthly, but we just do annual evals for the rest of the guys. And one of my guys, man, he was really struggling in some areas, and I think in the past, like he'd been evaluated like with just check marks, great, 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 and there was no accountability and stuff. And I didn't want to be that guy, the just the checkbox guy. And so, and I was, because I want them to be honest with me, and I think I owe them the respect and to be honest with them. And so I just told them like, hey man, like this and this, you're great, but this and this, it's bad, man, and it's something's got to change. And at first he was kind of shocked and stunned, and honestly, you could tell he was embarrassed, and he had some tears in his eyes and stuff. And he's like, man, he's like, I didn't even realize I was being that way. So I think for a lot of guys in my position or your position or even below us, like they just need to learn to be honest, because like if you're really someone's friend, like why do you want to just sugarcoat everything all the time? Like we should be trying to build each other up, not just get somebody by. And
Hmm.
so, we did that eval, and dude, like he's 180 degrees different, man. Like getting over that hump of being their trying to be their boss, that. And then once I saw the outcome of, hey, it's okay to, I can still be these guys' friends, but I still got to, lead them too. And man, like even across the department, they're like, "What did you do to him?" I was like, "I was just honest with him. Like I just told him like, hey man, like I know you can be better, like because I know how you are." And he tells me like, people talk about this all the time, but like he tells me all the time, I was like, man, I appreciate that conversation. And because he who knows, he may not have still stayed with the department had that not happened. Because he was kind of developing a name. You know how it goes.
Hmm.
And he was kind of the sore thumb. And so I didn't want him to be the sore thumb. And I want my crew to be the best. And so I think that's a bigger challenge just in general, but definitely as an officer. But I think those conversations need to be had at the firefighter level. Just firefighter to
Yeah.
firefighter. Because if you can stop that stuff before it starts, then I might not have to have that conversation. I'm glad I did, because I mean
Yeah.
it honestly helped. It helped me maybe just as much as it helped him.
One of the things that you said I really like. So my wife is an elementary school counselor, right? And she's coached and stuff before, but the last decade or so, she's been an elementary school counselor. And one of the things that she talks about with her kids is, I don't remember what she calls it, something like a nice sandwich or something like that. So if you're going to say something negative to somebody, you need to wrap it with nice things, like a
Okay.
nice sandwich. So I like what you said, like, hey, you're doing good at this and good at this, but you're really struggling here and here.
Hmm.
So when you
Hmm.
come to people, it seems like in a leadership position, when you come to people who you're, especially people who either you're equal or who you're in charge of, who you're supposed to be leading, when you go to them and just say, "You suck here, here, and here," and that's all you give
Yeah.
them, then
Right.
it's like, you know what I mean? It's a different mentality than, look, you're really, really good at this, 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 and this, but here's an area where you're struggling. Let me help you here. And I think what you said too is that being a good friend, like the fact that the crew were people who you cared about. I think that's key in leading is you got to choose to love the people that you're leading. And that's not, you love them because they're your kind of people. That's just a choice. Love's a choice. It's not just an emotion. It's like a decision to put their wants, needs, and desires, what's best for them above what's best or maybe easiest for you. Same
Hmm.
way I had to have a conversation with a guy not too long ago, a similar thing. And I just started off and I said, look, you've had some things go on where I was there for you, right? In the past. Yes. I said, if I tell you that I love you, do you believe that? He kind of looked at me weird and he's like, I said, I'm not weird, like, like, if I would tell you I love you and I care about you. Do you believe that I really care about you? What's best? And he said, yes. And I said, then I got to tell you this, and we had that conversation. It's the same thing. He got a little emotional stuff, but it was like,
Mhm.
it came different because I'd invested that over time. Where when I said, I care about you, and it wasn't like, no, I don't know that. Like he said, yes, I believe that. I believe, and earning that trust is important because
Mhm.
if you're just the guy who comes in and starts bossing people around and they don't know that you care about them, like why do they care what you think? You know what I mean? Like they may care
Right.
what you think because you're their boss, but they don't care what you think as an individual. And
Right.
and it seems like when they really know that you love them and you care about them, like those people, it's not about that they work for you, but it's like they give you their best, because and because you give them your best.
Yeah, they don't wanna let you down, you know?
Yeah. So we've went through a lot of things that you guys have went through, you and your wife, things that you've been through at church, things at work, and things like that. Have you, looking back, can you see how God has used those different things to kind of get you to where you guys are now at work, at ministry, and life, whatever, and just see His hand at work, kind of in some of those things?
Oh, 100%. I think it's just I don't wanna it's not like a pinpoint kinda thing, but I think just, like, all encompassing, like, everything that we do is I can see God in it, and that's just, even if we're just going to, like, a just out somewhere on town, like, we see people that know us, and they know us because of, what we've done through God. They've been at some event that we were at, and it may not have even been a church thing, but just we were there and we're just like the positive people. I think it's just always seemed to have, and especially my wife, and she doesn't understand it, but she she always draws a crowd to her, and I think that's just her personality. And she's kind of an antisocial person, but she gets forced into it, and I think that's because of the kind of leader that she is in life. God's placed that ability on her, and through that she's at the high school, so she helps out with the FCA thing, and I get to help because I know her, and so
Mhm,
we get to lead music at a school, which is pretty awesome.
mhm.
Everything in life, man, for us it revolves around God and anything that we can do to serve Him. And I know that sounds kind of probably cliche and generic, but man, I have this bracelet that I've worn for probably, geez, I don't know, 20 years, I guess. And I get asked about it all the time, and I keep it just because it's a good reminder. But the whole "I am second" thing, which is probably
Mhm.
not quite that popular anymore, but for me, like I just try to put God first in everything, and keep myself second, and just like they say. And it's not like I'm like out there like, oh no, what would Jesus do on every move that I make? But I think just, and it's probably just because I've been so immersed in that life that it's second nature, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I honestly think that the more that we learn to trust God, and this is going to sound weird and maybe dumb, but the more we learn to trust God, the more we trust God. You know what I mean? And we
Oh
don't
yeah,
learn to trust
100%.
Him except through going through those difficulties and seeing that, I didn't think I'd make it through. And then here we are,
Hmm.
or, I prayed that this would happen and I didn't get what I wanted, but now I can look back and see that God led me to something better, and through those things and that consciousness of God being there and working through all of those things. Romans 8:28 is one of my favorite verses, that God works all things together for good for those that love Him and are called according to His purpose. Well, there's
Right.
God works all things together for good, and a lot of times we stop there. No, He works all things together for good for those that love Him and are called according to His purpose. Well, what's His purpose? For us to share the gospel, for us to spread His love to people around us, for us to be the hands and feet of Jesus, and to love people and to serve people and put ourselves last and Him and then others first. And God works all things together for good for those that are doing that. And so if we're not perfect, but as long as we're striving and moving that direction, I think God will work all things together for good, and we can trust Him in those things.
Yeah, I agree with
Well,
that, completely.
So before we go, I want to ask you one more thing. What's a good piece of advice, leadership advice that you've gotten somewhere? It could be from the fire department. It could be from church. It could be from Big Lots
I
or from Halo.
didn't get too much
I don't
over
know,
there. Yeah,
something.
Halo.
What's a good piece of advice, leadership advice that you've got? Something that stuck out to you or that's stuck with you?
Kind of goes back to what I was talking about with that evaluation scenario. I think you just need to don't be afraid to be honest with yourself and with your guys, man. Like, because I think if you, especially in the fire service, but like if you think that you're the best, you probably aren't. You think you're trained up, and you just, I think it's just don't get complacent. It's easy to come in and do the paperwork and sit in the chair and all that stuff, but I would just say be honest with yourself and your guys.
Awesome. Well, Gerald, I want to thank you for being with us today, my friend. Thank you guys for joining with us, and we'll catch you next time on Call to Lead.
Thanks for having me, man. Glad to be here.